Hey everyone. So we are now in the Middle Ages. We have left Anglo-Saxon times and Beowulf to be in the Middle Ages. So I'm just going to give a general overview of some of the content and what I want you to get out of it as you then explore independently all the things on the module. And I want to make sure that I don't forget anything, so I have some stuff right here as I look down. So as far as the Middle Ages are concerned, what kicked off the Middle Ages and ended the Anglo-Saxon times is when the Normans came from Normandy, France in 1066, the Battle of Hastings, and they came in and really started to settle into England. Now, when that happened, there were less invasions. It kind of, started to calm down, and they were able to actually start to establish societies. And the whole concept of, instead of warring tribes always vying for land, they started to create this system of feudalism where there was, a king and the subjects, and they would pretty much keep separated, and you would have the feudal system with the serfs and the people who would work the land, and then so they could support themselves in exchange for working the land. They would give taxes to the king, and you have all of that. Now, also with that, with the Normans coming, there was French, and French was fancy, and it was if you really learned French at that time period, that was more for the nobles, but then there was also the lower French as well. So what was happening is the people who spoke French came in and infiltrated some of the English words, the way you would pronounce things, the way you would conjugate verbs, the way you would have endings of words. Now, if you could read and write French, that was for the fancy people, but still you couldn't help but have that language. Just speaking it would infiltrate the English language. And you can see the difference between Old English and Middle English. Middle English, we can actually kind of sort of read, and it almost looks like, how you can read Shakespeare, and it might be a little difficult because things are different, but Middle English is kind of like in between. There's no way you can read Old English, but Middle English, you're like, yeah, I can kind of see, and it's because of that infiltration of French. All right, what else can I say? Oh, another big thing is because society was forming and was being more regulated, one big thing is there was less warring of these tribes, but there was a quote unquote war or ideology of religion and politics. So you have the king, and that is the state, and then you have the Pope, that's housed in Italy, and that's the church. And so you would have this, who is really ruling the land? If you did something bad, did the king put your punishment, or did you have to answer to the Pope and to God for what you did wrong? And so there was a lot of that going on. And, to this day, we still have battles on, how do we make rules? Do we follow the Constitution? Or some people who, follow their holy book to say, well, that should be what's guiding politicians' decisions. And what we say firmly, separation of church and state. Now, the Middle Ages are from 1066 to around the Renaissance time. And with the Renaissance, and I don't know if you've learned this in classes before, but with Gutenberg's printing press and being able to disseminate information easily like that, where you can just print books, that revolution is almost like the way we have the internet now. The fact, if you could read and write and you could have enough wealth to get books, like they were readily available. Whereas, with us, you can just, if you can afford the internet and have a computer and things like that, which not everyone can, but still it's the access to information and the speed at which people could come up with ideas and innovate and things like that. That was the Renaissance. We're not there yet in the Middle Ages. So now let's just think about, what are we going to be reading during the Middle Ages? Well, Anglo-Saxon is Beowulf, and the Middle Ages, medieval time, Middle English, it's Chaucer. Chaucer, he was a poet of that time period. He wrote the Canterbury Tales, which is the work that we're going to be experiencing from 1387 to 1400. So a little late in the Middle Ages. And he was a poet, and he is who is known as like the father of English literature as we know it. You do have Beowulf, the poet who recorded Beowulf, but there's a lot of mystery what was going on with that. But it's pretty verifiable with Chaucer. And what he did is remember I was saying it's kind of hard to rhyme in Anglo-Saxon, and they even didn't. Well, when you had the influence of French, it was a lot easier to rhyme with English, with the endings of words. So what he did was he started to play, and he started to put rhymes at the ends of lines. And because of that influence of French, which was a Romance Latin-based language, it was a lot easier to also have a nice rhythm and cadence. So he did iambic pentameter and rhyming iambic pentameter. So you had da-da, 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 5 beats or five iambs, where the second one is has that heartbeat. It kind of trips along pretty quickly. And every 2 lines would rhyme, which would make it very light, kind of like Dr. Seuss. And when you have that, he had the ability to keep things light and upbeat, but he also, because of all that stuff going on with church and state and things get political, he wanted to use that humor to comment on society. So he did satire, and a lot of satire shines a light onto some of that corruption and hypocrisy and things like that. So he used the humor to suck people in, but then underneath it was like, whoa, what did he just do there? What was he saying? So the Canterbury Tales, what that is about is there's a bunch of people who are all going together on a pilgrimage. And pilgrimages were really big back then, and actually are still today for some groups. And I have one of those videos there that you can watch, which I find is fascinating. In the 1100s, 1300s, and here we are like 1,000 years later-ish, and we're still doing it. And so the point of a pilgrimage is where people believe that if you follow in the footsteps of saints or holy people within your faith, if you follow their footsteps and you visit where they had lived, like going to a museum, right? If you go to a certain church where a certain saint, a certain person was, then you'll be closer to your faith, closer to God, and people would do that. So there would be a bunch of pilgrims, they were called pilgrims, they would go on this journey, and one pilgrimage they would take was to Canterbury. There's a cathedral, a church in Canterbury, where there was an archbishop who was like just below the Pope in different places, because the Catholic faith was everywhere. It was in Italy, France, made it to England. And so you would have people, in line, just like you have the superintendent, and then you have the directors, and you have the principals. Well, you have the Pope, and then you have the Archbishop in different areas. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, he was in charge of a lot of faith and what was going on, the policies of the Catholic Church. King Henry II was, the king of the time, and the two of them, they had this like frenemy type thing. There was a bromance there, but when King Henry went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on, and I have that video that you can watch, because it's true and it's like fascinating, where King Henry II. I don't know if I said days before, but because of King Henry VIII is, the big Renaissance stuff. But King Henry II and Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, what happened is they were really good friends. And when Thomas Becket became the Archbishop, and you've got King Henry II together, they're like, we can form an alliance, and we can like really, make sure that all the subjects of the land and all the Catholics of the land, we can just make sure that they're toeing the line and everything. And so King Henry II also had some different ideas of what he'd like to do. And the Archbishop said, yeah, some of your policies are not in line with the Catholic faith. And so I'm going to say no, I'm not going to agree. And King Henry II was like, whoa, I thought we were tight. What's going on? He didn't realize how religious Thomas Becket was. And, King Henry thought that the two of each other were kind of help each other out, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, let's, and Thomas Becket was like, no, I'm not having it. Sorry. So what happened was King Henry II was so frustrated one day with his friend, the Archbishop. He was like, the myth is, because it's not proven that he said this exactly, but he's like, oh, will someone just get rid of him for me? And some knights overheard it. Now this part is true. What he actually said, it makes a good story, but we don't know exactly what he said. However, some knights took it to mean oh, the king really wants this guy dead. So when the Archbishop, Thomas Becket, was in church presiding over mass and the altar right there, 4 knights came in, stormed into the church, and brutally murdered him. There's pictures, paintings and sculptures and stuff where they say that they smashed his skull right off. It was horrible. So he became a saint after that, because the reason why he ultimately was killed is because of this big misunderstanding, because he was following his faith so much and not going along with King Henry II the way the king wanted. Now, he was a really holy man, and this is interesting. When they took off his robes, they realized that there's this whole idea that if you punish yourself and you suffer, that it makes you closer to God, and because you realize you're mortal and you're sinful and all that stuff. And so he wore this hair shirt and basically undershirt and underwear made of horsehair and stuff, and it was itchy, and fleas and lice lived in there, and it was all disgusting. And they're like, whoa, this guy was so dedicated, he's got to be this holy man. So they pushed him to sainthood really quickly. And that's why people will come and visit this church, this cathedral, because of what happened there. And incidentally, the king felt really, really bad, and he walked through town, I can't remember, carrying something, and he allowed people to throw stuff at him because he wanted to shame himself and say I'm my big time bad. So the Canterbury Tales is this rhyming, satirical story about all these people who come to go to see this church, to be one with Thomas Becket and what had happened. And the journey itself is really difficult, kind of like what King Henry II had to endure. Now, here's the thing, is the whole thing, it's, he introduces all these people. There's this whole thing that along the way, this is a pretty long road trip. So people would have, the whole thing is that all these different characters on the journey, in order to make the journey a little bit more pleasant, they would take turns telling stories, jokes, parables, morality stories, with things with morals at the end. And so the idea was, whoever tells the best story, when we go back to the inn that we were all, this B&B type, thing, when we go back to the inn, that person will get a free meal. So they try to outdo each other. Now, Chaucer, what's interesting, the stories are fun, But what's interesting is the descriptions of the people. It is like a slice of life from the medieval times. A nun, a cook, what a cook was like back then. You have what a lawyer was like back then, and they describe what they wore, different props that they would have with them. You would have, what a tax collector was like. You have a friar, and which was kind of like a monk, but a monk was more like cloistered away by themselves. A friar was more of the people and would do work. So you have all these people, religious people and regular people, lawyers, doctor was one, a physician. So what's fascinating is it's like going back in time, reading all this. Plus, it's rhyming. And so it's really clever. And if I have translations in modern English, and if you totally geek out, what you can see is how did they rhyme? How did Chaucer rhyme in the Middle Ages? And how did we have to, pull and stretch some of the words so it was still matching the original Middle English, but it still works today with the rhyming and all of that. So that's actually kind of interesting if you're into that. But I have the translations, and you can read them. And I picked two pretty famous ones. And here's the satire. You've got a pardoner. And what a pardoner is he works for the church. He's not a man of the cloth where he's taking vows. But what he does is, especially in Catholic faith, you give donations to the church, and then you can get these relics and things like that. And it's a way to make you feel better about your sins. You can pray, and you can relieve yourself of some of that spiritual burden and guilt that, if I bought this, little tiny statue of Jesus or Mary or something like that, and I'm donating to the church, and I can like relieve myself. So that's what he does, but he's corrupt. He's a bad man. He admits like the biggest sin of all is greed. The love of money is one of the worst things you can have. And he even says that he would take the last penny of a poor widow who's trying to feed her children because he wants that greed. So he's saying how bad this stuff is, but he embodies all that is bad. But yet he's trying to sell things so people can feel good and better about their faith. So it doesn't gel. And he tells this story about where you can find death, and death is under a tree. And it's all about money was found under a tree, and people were fighting over the money under the tree, and ultimately they kill each other. So that's why you find death under the tree. The money was there, but the people were so evil that they fought and killed each other. But he's kind of doing the same thing. So that's very ironic. The other story is about a woman. She is from the town of Bath. And so she's the wife of Bath. And she is a hoot. She has had 5 different husbands. And she admits everything that she's done. Oh yeah, I married some older men for their money, and I, teased a bunch of them and did all these things. And then like one she had like lined up kind of like right before the other one died. And she married this one when she was 40, which back then would have been kind of old because you didn't live as long. And so she's like, yeah, I was 40 and married a 20-year-old man half my age, ooh. So she is something else. And what's interesting with her is she is a person very much of this world. She's not spiritual. She doesn't work for the church. She's more representative of the state. And she is what she is. She comes right out, and she is like the first feminist. And she is basically saying, yeah, like I live my life the way I live, and I make no apologies, and this is who I am. But in her heart, she looks at the Holy Book and the scriptures, and she's like, well, I mean, yeah, I do these things, but look at like what's in my heart, and I follow it. Now, her story is about a knight and how he's looking for love, and he like makes a bad choice, a really bad choice, and he's going to be killed. But the queen says, wait, you can redeem yourself. if you can find out what the one thing all women truly want. And so he's going around. What does a woman want? He asks all these women, because the thing that he did was really bad towards disrespectful against women. So they're like, wait a minute, if you can redeem yourself, see how the partner sells like fake relics and steals people's money for like a fake transformation, spiritual transformation. She tells a story of real, true transformation. Disrespected women, if you can find out what women really want and really learn from this, it won't kill you. So he asks everyone, he asks all these women, and they keep on having different answers. And he's like, I don't know, like some women want money, some women want a handsome guy, some women want this, like, so he sees this one woman, and she's not the most attractive. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, if I don't find this answer, they're gonna kill me. So she's like, I'll tell you what they really want. And he's like, okay, fine, come with me to the queen. Go to the queen. We found out. And he's like, okay, so what is it? And she's like, what women want is to be in control in the relationship. They want to be powerful. The queen's like, yes, absolutely, right. So spares his life. And now he marries the old woman. That's like part of the deal of not being killed anymore. So he's not exactly happy about this. So his new wife, this old hag, she's like, what can I do? How can I make it better? And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, tell you what, I'll give you a choice. Do you want me to stay ugly, but be faithful and true to you? Or, guess what? I've got some magical powers. I can make myself beautiful, desirable to you, everything you wanted, but I'm not going to be faithful. I'm going to mess around. Which one do you want? So he's like, you know what? You're my wife. I defer to you. Whatever you think is best, choose for me. She's like, yes, that's the right answer. And she's like, guess what? I am beautiful and I will be true. And so it's a happy ending. So the whole thing is, it's very interesting where you have the partner tells this like really bad, dark story about death and money and stuff when he is really dark. And you have this light, happy story from this woman who's just like full of life and doing her thing and is what it is and completely honest about everything. So that's where you have that irony and the satire. So if you made it this long to listen to my whole thing, going through all those resources won't take very long. What do you want to learn more about? What are you curious about? There's a couple little green checks. Do all of that. For some of you, maybe you didn't want to watch this thing and you can just do it independently and you're going through. But what I want from you by the end of this module, you know how you did your Beowulf boast? Or at least you should have. And I had fun listening to those and watching them. What I want you to do is you are going to embrace your own inner Chaucer, and you are going to do pick someone from our society, satirize them, call them out, describe what they look like, what they wear, who what they have, any props with them, how do they behave. Now you don't have to make up a story that they tell. That would be quite a lot. Just pick a slice of life from today that if someone from 500 years on, if they were to find what we wrote, it would be like going back in time and seeing what it's like in 2020. So think of a modern day person. Describe them, but be a little critical of them. And here's the thing too, make it rhyme. Last time you didn't, you had to do all the alliteration and the punch, all that stuff. Now, if you can make it an iambic pentameter, that would be fantastic. But if not, at least do 10 rhyming couplets. So that means 20 lines about a person that you want to be critical of in today's society. It could just be a general person, like a fast food worker, a politician, a lawyer today, professional sports player, babysitter, the judge, whatever you want, and describe them in a way where you're making fun of them, and you're making some type of point, and you're gonna make it rhyme. That is going to be your immersion in the Middle Ages experience with Chaucer. You're also gonna make 2 little discussion posts you'll see, and then the other thing is to look at the Middle English. I want you to experience it. See how much of it you can actually figure out. You could look it up online and you could copy and paste it and put it in there. That's no fun. I want you to see, I have the part where you can listen to it. Listen to it. Can you hear it? Almost like the pumped up kicks, but this is way closer to modern English. Just have fun with that. That's what I got for you. Thank you for listening. We're almost there. Towards the end of the marking period, we're almost coming back in person. Can't wait to see you all. New times that we're having, right? So we're transitioning to getting up earlier and to get us closer to what it's gonna be like when we come back in November. Have fun. Can't wait to see what you post for that by the end of the week for the Chaucer prologue satirical characters. Take care. Have a great week.